On my 20th birthday, my mom told me to leave like a man. I did, but not the way she hoped. You know that feeling when you wake up on your birthday expecting maybe some pancakes or at least a happy birthday? Yeah, well, my 20th birthday started with ice-cold water splashing across my face. I jolted awake, gasping, completely disoriented. My mom was standing over me with an empty glass in her hand. Her face was hard, emotionless. "Time to man up and move out, Tyler," she said flatly. I blinked water out of my eyes, trying to process what was happening. My stepdad, Greg, was already standing in the doorway with my stuff piled up in garbage bags at his feet. What's going on?" I stammered, sitting up in my soaking wet bed. "You heard your mother," Greg said, crossing his arms. "You're 20 years old now. Time to be an adult." My heart was pounding. "But I'm your son. I don't understand." Mom let out this bitter laugh. "You've been nothing but a burden since your father died. Do you know how much money we've wasted on your therapy? All that crying about nightmares and daddy issues." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. My dad had died in Afghanistan when I was 7. I'd spent years in grief counseling trying to cope with losing him. "We kept a roof over your head for 20 years, Greg added, picking up one of the garbage bags. "That's more than most people would do. You should be grateful." Before I could even fully grasp what was happening, they were literally shoving my belongings into my arms. I tried to argue, tried to reason with them, but part of me just gave up. I think I was in shock. I ended up at a homeless shelter downtown after wandering around for hours, sitting on benches, petting stray cats, trying to meditate or whatever you call it when you're having a complete mental breakdown. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fill out the intake paperwork at the shelter. Then my phone buzzed. They'd unblocked me just to twist the knife deeper. The message was from Greg. "At least your dad had the decency to die in Afghanistan." I broke down right there on that plastic chair in the intake office. Completely fell apart. This older woman, one of the shelter counselors named Patricia, came over and put her hand on my shoulder. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked gently. I couldn't even speak. I just showed her my phone. She read the messages, her expression darkening. Then she looked down at my intake form, and something in her face changed completely. Her whole body went rigid. "Wait," she said, her voice strange. "Tyler Matthews, your father died in Afghanistan." "Yeah," I managed to choke out. "When I was 7. She gripped the edge of her desk. "Did you ever see his body? Go to a burial?" I wiped my eyes, confused. "What? I mean, there was a funeral. Why are you asking me this? Did anyone from the military ever come to check on you after? Visit your family?" I don't know. Not really, no. "Patricia, why are you asking me this?" She pulled out her laptop with shaking hands. Started typing frantically. After what felt like an eternity, her face went completely white. "Tyler," she said slowly, looking up at me, "your father didn't die in Afghanistan." Everything stopped. The room, time, my heart. "What? He's alive. He's at Riverside VA Psychiatric Hospital. He's been there for 10 years. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. Everything was spinning. "That's impossible. We had a funeral. I went to grief therapy for years. I went to his funeral." Patricia stared directly into my eyes. "You need to go see your father. Today. Right now, before your mother and Greg realize you know." Little things started clicking into place. The way Mom would change the channel whenever military families came on TV. How we moved to a completely different state right after the funeral. Why there were never any photos of Dad in the house anymore. "Why do I need to go today?" I asked, my brain still trying to reject this reality. "Because when, not if, but when, your parents find out you know your dad is alive, they're going to know someone's onto them. There are benefits involved here, Tyler. Military benefits that they've been collecting." Patricia drove me to Riverside herself. The whole drive, my head was spinning, rejecting everything. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. We walked down this long hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner and medication. And then I saw him. My dad. Not some stranger. Not the Greg who'd kicked me out. Not Mom's other boyfriends over the years who'd come and gone. My actual father. The one who used to build blanket forts with me and read me bedtime stories about astronauts. Dad. The word came out barely as a whisper. He turned around, and his face just crumbled. Tears immediately started streaming down his cheeks. Tyler, he breathed. They told me I'd never see you again. They told me you hated me. They said you were. His voice broke. I thought you were dead. I couldn't breathe. I went to your funeral. Mom said you died a hero. I've been grieving you for 13 years. The pain on his face was unbearable. They told me you knew the truth and you chose them over me. That you wanted nothing to do with your broken dad. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out with numb fingers and looked at the screen. A notification from my bank. My college fund, gone. My savings account, closed. Everything my grandparents had left me for college, every birthday check, everything, wiped out. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor. Dad saw the screen before it went dark. All my combat pay, he whispered. Every single month for 10 years. I sent it for your future. To make sure you'd be taken care of. I never saw a penny of it. A doctor came in then, a woman in a white coat with kind eyes. Mr. Matthews has been cleared for discharge for years, she explained. But he's disabled from his service injuries. He needs a family member to release him to. Someone who can care for him. I'll do it, I said immediately. The words came out almost before she finished her sentence. I'll take care of him. The next morning felt surreal. Dad walked out of that hospital wearing civilian clothes, actual jeans and a flannel shirt, for the first time in a decade. His breathing got shallow and rapid as we approached my mom and Greg's house. 10 years, Dad muttered as we walked up to the front door. 10 years they stole from us. I knocked on the door where they'd literally shoved me out less than 48 hours earlier. Footsteps inside. The deadbolt turning. The door swung open. Greg stood there, and I actually almost laughed at how fast the color drained from his face. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Because, well, he was. Mom appeared behind him and dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the tile floor. Dad smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Hello, Greg. I think we need to talk about my death benefits. Greg's face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock. Confusion. This weird calculation happening behind his eyes. Then his cheeks flushed red with anger. Mom just stood there, frozen, coffee spreading across the white tile like blood. The sound of that mug breaking was honestly beautiful. Like all their lies shattering with it. You can't just show up here. Greg suddenly shouted. You're trespassing. You're making crazy accusations. Mom shifted tactics quickly, and I've got to admit, if she wasn't such a horrible person, it would have been impressive. Her whole face softened into this concerned expression. Marcus, she said to my dad in this sickeningly sweet voice, are you taking your medication? I think you might be confused about what happened. She was talking to him like he was a lost child. My hand moved to my pocket before I even consciously decided to do it. I opened my phone's camera app and hit record, keeping it low by my side but angled up to catch everything. I kept my expression neutral and just let them talk. After about 30 seconds, Greg's eyes locked onto my phone. He lunged forward, hand outstretched to grab it. Dad stepped between us, and even though I could see his hands shaking, he stood his ground. Greg stopped. He looked past Dad to a neighbor getting their mail down the street. His expression changed again. He backed up. I kept recording. Why don't we all sit down inside and discuss this calmly, Mom suggested, her voice dripping with fake concern. Dad's breathing changed. Fast. Shallow. I could see his chest rising and falling too quickly. I recognized that from the hospital. He was having a panic attack. I made a decision right there. We just came to let you know we're not staying, I said, touching Dad's arm. Come on, Dad. Let's go. He nodded but didn't speak. We turned and walked back to Patricia's car. I could feel Mom and Greg watching us from the doorway the entire time. When I got Dad into the passenger seat, he just stared at his hands. They were still shaking. I sat in the driver's seat, pulling out Patricia's number. She'd given it to me for emergencies, and this felt like one. "Patricia, we went to the house," I said when she answered. It was bad. I recorded everything, but Dad's not doing well." "Okay, honey. Okay. Listen, I have a voucher for emergency housing, just for tonight. Let me text you the address." The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd expect, a budget motel off the highway with zero actual sunset views. But it had 2 beds and a door that locked, and that was more than I'd had 48 hours ago. I spread everything out on the desk. Dad's discharge papers. My birth certificate that I'd grabbed from my room before they threw me out. Screenshots of the texts. The bank notification about my emptied account. I took pictures of everything on my phone. Then I backed it all up to the cloud. Then I emailed copies to myself. I called the number on the bank notification and got transferred to the fraud department. 10 minutes on hold listening to elevator music. Finally, someone answered. I explained what happened. "I see here that your college savings account was closed yesterday morning," the representative said. "All funds were transferred to an account outside your access. You'll need to file a police report and prove the money was yours." "How am I supposed to prove that when I'm homeless and barely functioning?" My voice cracked. She was quiet for a moment. "I understand this is difficult, but that's what's required." She gave me a case number and told me to call back after I filed the police report. Dad spoke for the first time since we left the house. "I set up an allotment when I enlisted. Automatic transfer to support my family. I didn't understand all the technical details. I just wanted you taken care of if something happened to me." The guilt in his voice made my throat tight. "I thought you were getting that money the whole time," he said. "For college, for your future." "I never saw any of it, Dad." He put his face in his hands, and something inside me just broke seeing that. This combat veteran who'd been locked away for 10 years. Who'd lost his son, his life, everything. And he was feeling guilty because he'd tried to help me and it got stolen. We sat on those motel beds until his breathing settled. Then I spent an hour backing up everything again. Patricia had drilled into me, documentation is everything when you're fighting people with more resources than you. I created a folder labeled Evidence and uploaded every screenshot, the voice recording from the porch, photos of every document. I saved it in 3 places. My phone, Google Drive, email drafts. If my phone died, got stolen, or if Mom and Greg somehow deleted something, I wouldn't lose this. Each backup felt like building a shield, piece by piece. The next morning, we drove back to Riverside, VA. Dad needed to update his ID with his current address. Well, the motel address. We also needed to get printouts of his benefits history. The discharge coordinator was this woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. She was helpful but moved like someone who'd been processing paperwork all day, every day, for the last 20 years. She typed out Dad's information with 2 fingers. Printed forms. Had him sign things. "The ID should be processed in about 3 weeks," she said. "The benefits history should be ready this afternoon. Call this number." I sat in a plastic chair and practiced patience. Every part of me was screaming that we needed answers faster, that Mom and Greg might be hiding money or destroying evidence right now, but I kept quiet and waited. When we got back to the motel, Dad said he was tired. He fell asleep almost immediately. I sat at the desk staring at the organized paperwork. We'd taken the first steps. We'd confronted them. We'd started documenting everything. We'd started reclaiming Dad's identity. It wasn't enough. But it was something. And something was infinitely more than what I'd had 3 days ago when I woke up to cold water on my face. The next morning, I found the VA benefits number in the documents and called it. Got transferred 4 times. Sat on hold for 25 minutes listening to hold music from 1987. Finally, a woman asked for Dad's social security number. I read it off the discharge papers. I tried to explain about representative payees and power of attorney, stumbling over my words. She was patient. A representative payee manages someone's benefits when they can't manage them themselves. They have to apply and be approved by the VA. Someone's been getting my dad's benefits under that arrangement for years, I said. Who is it? I can't give you that information over the phone without authorization. I grabbed the notepad and started writing everything down. My hand was shaking so badly my handwriting looked like a kid's. She used all these acronyms I didn't understand. POA, RP, Vero, terms I'd never heard before. After an hour on the phone, my brain was overloaded with information I barely comprehended. I called Patricia back and told her about the VA call. Tyler, I think we need to connect you with Adult Protective Services. Your parents might have financially exploited a disabled veteran. That's a serious crime. I hesitated. Mom had taught me for years that government agencies were traps, that they made everything worse, that you couldn't trust them. Honey, I can hear you thinking, Patricia said gently. Sometimes the system is the only defense you have. I thought about how the system had found Dad before I even knew to look. Okay, I said. She gave me a name. Lucas Chen. Said he was good at cases like this. Before I called him, I tried something else. I dug through my phone contacts for family members I barely remembered. Aunts, uncles, cousins from before we moved states. Most of the numbers were disconnected. I left 3 voicemails explaining what happened. 2 calls went unanswered entirely. I tried my mom's sister, Aunt Rachel. She answered on the 4th ring. I started to introduce myself, and she cut me off. Your mother already told me you'd be calling with lies to make them look bad, she said coldly. I'm not getting involved in family drama. Aunt Rachel, Dad's alive. He didn't die. I want you to stop right there, she interrupted. Your mother lost her husband and raised you alone. You should be grateful instead of causing problems. Then she hung up. I sat staring at my phone. Mom had been isolating us for years, making sure nobody was around who might question her story or support me if I ever found out the truth. After Dad went to bed, I opened a new document on my phone and started writing down everything I could remember. I put Dad's supposed death at the top. Age 7. Then I listed everything that happened after. How we moved states within months of the funeral. How Mom would get anxious whenever military families appeared on TV. How she'd change the subject quickly whenever I asked about Dad's service or wanted to see his pictures. How she threw away most of his stuff during the move because it hurt too much to keep it. How we never visited his grave. Not once. All those therapy sessions where I cried about losing him. Years of nightmares. Mom using my grief to control me, making me feel guilty for being sad. Writing it all down revealed the patterns. It wasn't random. It was a carefully constructed web of lies. A 10-year-long lie that had been meticulously maintained. All designed to keep me from asking the right questions. My phone lit up at midnight with a text from Mom. We should talk if you're willing to stop spreading lies and badmouthing me to the neighbors. You're embarrassing me. People are asking questions. I think you're being emotional and we can work this out if you just calm down and come home. I read it 3 times. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Part of me wanted to type back everything I was feeling. But I knew that's what she wanted. She wanted me to engage so she could twist my words and gaslight me. Instead, I took a screenshot. Added it to the evidence folder. Then I put my phone face down on the desk without replying. The next morning, over the free continental breakfast I brought back to the room, I told Dad we needed to discuss boundaries and safety. He looked up at me like he was bracing for bad news. Mom and Greg might try to call you, I said. You can't tell them where we're staying or what we're doing. You can't tell them anything. He nodded, but his eyes showed that same fear I'd seen at the hospital. The fear that I might leave him. I reached across the little table and grabbed his arm. I'm not going anywhere. I promised we'd figure this out together, and I meant it. His shoulders relaxed slightly. I had a legal aid appointment that afternoon. The office was in a strip mall between a tax place and a nail salon. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and copy machine toner. The lawyer was a woman named Jennifer Park. Maybe in her 30s, black hair pulled back, glasses that made her look both smart and tired. She shook our hands and invited us to sit. Opened a yellow legal pad. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her everything. Waking up to cold water on my birthday. The shelter counselor finding Dad. The confrontation on the porch. The emptied bank accounts. She never interrupted. Just took notes and nodded occasionally. When I finished, she looked up. "We can potentially file for fraud and conversion. That's the legal term for lying to steal money and property. There might also be a criminal component if the DA's office gets involved." She asked to see my evidence, so I pulled out my phone with all the photos and recordings. "You were smart to document everything," she said, scrolling through. "This is going to take time, but I can help you." 3 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. "Tyler. This is Lucas Chen from Adult Protective Services." The conversation was long. He asked detailed questions about Dad's situation, took notes, said he'd be opening a case file and assigning an investigator. "This will take time," he warned. "We need to interview multiple people, obtain financial records." I wanted to scream. I wanted answers now. I wanted Mom and Greg punished immediately. "A thorough investigation is better than a quick dismissal," Lucas said, his voice steady. "Document everything. Someone will call you in about a week to schedule interviews." The bank called next. A fraud department investigator named Sarah Mitchell. She listed all the documentation they needed. Police report. Identification. Proof that the account was supposed to be for my benefit. Any documentation showing that my parents' access was unauthorized. I wrote everything down, but each requirement felt like climbing a mountain. "Take it one step at a time," Sarah said, maybe hearing the stress in my voice. "Get what you can. Call me back. Here's my direct line." That afternoon, a VA social worker named Robert Sullivan called. He wanted to schedule a consultation about housing and caregiver programs for Dad. He also mentioned changing Dad's representative payee. He used terms I didn't understand. HUD VASH. Caregiver stipends. Aid and attendance. I grabbed my notepad again, writing fast, but he was talking quickly and I was losing track. He must have noticed because he slowed down. "I'll email you everything. When can we meet in person?" We scheduled it for the next week. When I hung up, I looked over at Dad watching TV on the bed. For the first time since this started, I felt something that might have been hope. Someone who knew the system, who wanted to help us. The next morning, Jennifer from Legal Aid helped me draft a formal request to Peaceful Meadows Funeral Home, the place where Mom had taken me to that memorial service 13 years ago. Jennifer typed on her computer while I gave her the details. "We need official proof of their services versus what your mother claimed happened." The response came 3 days later in an envelope delivered to the motel. I opened it while Dad watched from the bed. The funeral director stated that they'd provided memorial ceremony space on that date, but had received no remains for burial or cremation. Their records showed a 2-hour chapel rental, no casket purchase, no burial plot, no cremation authorization. I felt sick reading it. I knew Dad was alive, but seeing in writing that the funeral was completely empty, that it was all theater, made me want to throw up. That afternoon, I drove to the police station downtown. The desk officer directed me to Detective Sarah Williams' office. She was maybe 50, with gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head. I sat in a plastic chair across from her desk while she pulled up a form on her computer. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her everything. Again. Cold water on my 20th birthday. Finding Dad alive at Riverside. The emptied bank accounts. 10 years of stolen benefits. Detective Williams typed steadily, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she printed everything out and had me review the report for accuracy. "Financial crimes are complex," she said, handing me a business card. "Especially ones involving multiple parties and government benefits. This will take time to investigate. But this report number will help you with the bank and other agencies." She gave me a case number and told me to call if I remembered anything else or if my parents contacted me. I folded the police report and added it to my evidence folder. 3 days later, I was sorting through papers on the motel bed when I glanced out the window. Greg's truck was parked 3 spaces down. Just sitting there, him behind the wheel, staring at our room. My whole body went cold. I grabbed my phone and called 911 immediately. Started shoving our stuff into bags with shaking hands. Dad asked what was wrong. I pointed out the window. His face went pale. The 911 dispatcher stayed on the line while I packed. Police are 7 minutes away. Through the gap in the curtain, I watched Greg. He just sat there, staring. When the police arrived, Greg drove away slowly. Casual. The cops took a report and told me to document any future contact. After they left, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. "From now on," I said, "we keep our bags packed. Just in case." The next day, Jennifer helped me request my school records from the district office. "We need proof of the years of grief therapy your mother put you through." A week later, I spread the documents across the motel desk. Pages and pages of counseling notes from when I was 7 to 16. Each one had the same diagnosis code for parental loss. The therapist's notes detailed my persistent trauma about Dad's supposed death. How I cried about missing him. How I had nightmares about the funeral. How Mom told the therapist I needed help processing my father's combat death. The same diagnosis code billed to my parents' insurance for every single session. Reading years of my grief described in clinical terms felt like reading about someone else's pain. But it also created a paper trail showing exactly how long and how deliberately Mom and Greg had lied. Jennifer filed preservation letters the following week. One to the bank. One to my parents' address. The letters required them, in legal language, not to destroy any records related to Dad's benefits or my accounts. "This is standard before filing suit," Jennifer explained. "If they destroy evidence after receiving this notice, they can face additional penalties." I felt different reading the letter before she mailed it. For weeks, we'd been reacting to their actions. Now we were demanding their cooperation. Sarah Mitchell from the bank called 3 days later with an update. "Our fraud investigation found a pattern. Years of transfers from your father's benefits account to your mother and Greg's joint account." She'd flagged the transactions as suspicious and built a timeline, but she warned me they needed more documentation to prove the transfers were unauthorized. "We need VA paperwork showing your dad never approved your mother as his representative. We might need court orders to access certain accounts." The VA called Dad that same week to schedule an interview about his representative payee. Victor Sullivan explained they needed to interview him alone, without family present, to make sure he could express his wishes freely. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Someone was finally asking what Dad wanted instead of what everyone else claimed he wanted. Lucas Chen called 3 days later. "I visited your mother and Greg's house for the APS investigation," he said. "They were cooperative. They claimed to have power of attorney to manage your father's affairs while he was hospitalized." He paused. "They seemed prepared. Had documentation ready, explanations for everything. But I requested copies to verify legitimacy. Financial abusers often have legitimate-looking paperwork." He said he'd update me as the investigation progressed. After hanging up, I felt frustrated. Of course Mom and Greg were cooperative. They'd been lying successfully for 10 years. They knew how to play the game. The following week, Jennifer obtained copies of the supposed power of attorney through legal discovery. She called me into her office and spread the document on her desk. It showed Dad supposedly signing over power of attorney to Mom. But even to my untrained eye, something looked wrong. The signature was shaky, uneven. The letters didn't match Dad's signature on his VA paperwork or any of the forms we'd been filling out. The date was from 13 years ago, right when Dad was first hospitalized. Jennifer pointed out other issues. The notary seal was faded. The witness signatures were barely legible. "We might need a handwriting expert to prove it's forged," she said. "But even without that, this document looks questionable." The next morning, Dad and I went to the DMV to get him a state ID. With Robert Sullivan's help, we'd set up a VA PO box for official mail since the motel was temporary. We filled out the application. Dad provided his discharge papers and social security card. The clerk processed everything and said the ID would be ready in 20 minutes. When they called Dad's name, He walked up and the clerk handed him a temporary paper ID with his photo. Dad stared at it for a long moment. His name. His first real address in 10 years. Not a hospital, not Mom and Greg's house. Our address. I watched him carefully fold it and put it in his wallet. Just a piece of paper with his information on it. But it felt like a tiny victory in a war we were still fighting. Robert Sullivan called that afternoon about the VA Caregiver Program application. Over the phone, he walked me through what medical documentation I needed from Dad's records at Riverside, which forms needed a doctor's signature, what information was required. The application asked detailed questions about Dad's daily care needs, his disabilities, his treatment plan. I checked boxes for medication management, appointment transportation, meal preparation, emotional support. Every question made the weight of responsibility feel heavier. That night, I started the first round of training, watching videos about veteran mental health, caregiver burnout, setting boundaries, asking for help. The program kept emphasizing self-care, which felt weird when I was 20 years old and had no idea what I was doing. 3 days after the DNA test results arrived, confirming with 99.9% certainty that I was Dad's biological son, Lucas Chen called. I received the results. I'm filing them with APS for the official record. Another piece of proof. Another brick in our wall. I added the report to our evidence folder. To the cloud backup. Proof of something I'd never doubted, but that the system forced me to validate anyway. 3 months after I woke up to cold water on my face, I was sitting at our kitchen table organizing Dad's evening medication. The apartment smelled like the cheap chicken and rice I'd made for dinner. My laptop was open to my community college coursework, an online writing class I'd started the week before. In the living room, Dad was laughing at something a cooking show host said. I looked around our small space. The thrift store couch. The donated dishes in the cabinet. The VA appointment reminder magnetized to the fridge. This quiet Thursday night of pills, dinner, homework. This was stability. Not exciting or dramatic. Just reliable. Safe. Things aren't perfect now, I won't lie. We're still in therapy, still navigating legal processes, still learning how to be father and son after 13 years apart. Dad still has nightmares and panic attacks. I'm still angry about the childhood we lost. But this apartment is ours. The lease is in our names. There's food in the fridge bought with money nobody can steal. We're making our own plans for the future. That's not a happy ending where everything's wrapped up neatly and everyone lives happily ever after. It's something better. It's a real beginning. So yeah, that's the story of the worst parenting fail I've ever experienced. You might think your family is complicated, but at least they probably didn't fake someone's death for a decade. Probably.